Just last week, guys, Bungie hit us with a bombshell of a reveal. Now, let me just say, watching that reveal, seeing the eye candy of Prismatic, which is the new subclass we're getting, the exotic class items, which is going to have the ability to merge different exotics together, crossing over from different classes. And then Bungie put out a blog post going over the details of the abilities we'll be starting out with in the final shape, as well as some of the fragments that will be filling out the Prismatic Subclass. Now, a question that has popped up multiple times since last week is, will Prismatic and exotic class items kill our current builds? And that's an understandable question. I mean, why would you ever want to rock normal exotics when you can rock an exotic that combines two exotics together? Why would you ever want to use a single subclass when you can have the power of all of them at your fingertips? I get it. But today though, guys, we have teamed up with Court to give you a visual representation of what to expect with your builds in the final shape with Prismatic. I'm a visual learner myself, and having these infographics here made by Court helps me a ton. And if you want to see these infographics for yourself, his links will be present down below, guys, so please feel free to check them out. With that being said though, we're going to break down the potential of Prismatic, what we're going to have in our arsenal going into the final shape. We're also going to talk about those exotic class items, as I don't think it's as black and white when you start to look at this in depth on whether or not Prismatic and these exotic class items will kill our current builds, because there's pros and cons to all of this. So without further ado, let's get started. Now, down below, we do have timestamps if you want to skip to any particular spot in today's video, as we have a lot of information to cover. But we're going to start things off with our new subclass, Prismatic. Prismatic allows us to mix and match select abilities together from all 5 elements. Now, we do something called build battles on the channel, where we essentially take people's builds and compete them against one another. This takes it to a whole nother level in terms of build crafting. And we're not just talking about mixing, say, Void and Solar together. We're talking about having a Void Grenade paired with a Stasis Melee while using a Strand Super. And we're going to go over a multitude of combinations here in just a moment. But while you use Prismatic, another feature is that under your super meter, you have another meter. This new bar is known as Transcendence. It's split in half, one for the light and one for the dark. And essentially, when you deal light aligned damage, that being Arc, Solar, and Void, or apply light aligned buffs or debuffs, that light bar on the left will start to fill all the way up. Now, when you deal darkness aligned damage, that being Stasis or Strand, or you apply darkness aligned buffs or debuffs, the darkness bar on the right also fills. Now, when you deal kinetic damage, you're able to fill up both of these bars together, although it will be at a reduced rate, with the rate only increasing if one or the other bars is already filled. Now, once both bars are filled all the way, they will meet in the middle, and that is when Transcendence is now available. Now, while you are Transcendent, each class gets a unique grenade that's exclusive to their class. For Warlocks, it's a Freezing Singularity. Essentially, you throw a massive Void Energy and Stasis Matter together, and on impact, it deploys a miniature black hole orbited by a halo of slowing ice. Now, after a short duration, the black hole implodes, suppressing and then dealing heavy damage to all nearby targets. Now, this grenade will be able to slow and suppress targets, which is the perfect combination for both of those effects when it comes to countering overload champions. Now, Titans will have a grenade called Electrified Snare, where you throw an explosive device energized with Strand Matter and Arc Energy that detonates in a supercharged suspending burst. Now, the suspended target takes heavy damage over time and will chain jolting lightning to any nearby targets. And this grenade seems incredibly powerful. You of course have the jolting effect, which can stun things like overload champions, and it's great for just ad clearing. But then you also have the suspend effect, which directly stuns unstoppable champions and locks down everything in place. The synergy here looks beautiful though, because you're going to hit them with the suspend and the jolt all at the same time, locking them all in place. Nothing's running away from you. Now, lastly, we have the Hunter's grenade called Hellfire Spike. You throw a device charged with Stasis Matter and Solar Energy that attaches to surfaces or targets and then erupts into a slowing storm. After a short duration, the device ignites, creating a deadly scorching cyclone. Now, this is another grenade that should be very powerful. You have slow, which can stun overload champions. Then you have ignitions, which can stun unstoppable champions. And along with that, it says it can create a deadly scorching cyclone, which I can imagine will stack on even more scorch stacks of targets affected by that cyclone, possibly creating even more ignitions. But those are the grenades you gain from Transcendence. Along with that, your melee and your grenade energy are instantly refreshed and also regenerate more quickly. Additionally, dealing damage with your grenade further increases your melee regeneration and vice versa, with melee damage further increasing your grenade regeneration. You also get weapon damage bonus that is stackable with other weapon damage bonuses, and on top of that, you're more resistant to incoming damage. In addition, while in the new Pelhard destination, you'll be able to shatter witness-empowered shields for certain enemy types. I hope this kind of paints a clear picture of what you can expect from Prismatic, outside of us just playing with it. But that is the basis of how Prismatic works. But then we have another thing that's exclusive only to this subclass, and that is our exotic class items. Now it's funny because last year we actually asked for exotic class items purely for a flex. I was not expecting Bungie to take this any further than that because it's just a class item. But these are going to allow us to take perks from other exotics and then combine two of their effects together. Now the example they showed us in their developer live stream was on the Titan class, and it had two perks on its class item. Now one was Spirit of Ophidian, where weapons ready very quickly, and then we have Spirit of Star Eater, where orbs of power overcharge your super. Now what's so powerful about that is that both of those exotics exist on other classes. Star Eater Scale, that's on the Hunter class, Ophidian Aspects, that's on the Warlock. Now you're able to merge those two together and then give them to Titan. Then we saw the Warlock exotic class item that had the Spirit of the Assassin, where finishers and powered melee final blows grant you invisibility, essentially Assassin's Cowl, along with Spirit of Syntheseps, which improves melee damage when you're surrounded. Do you see how these exotics are reaching across different classes, giving us abilities that we never had and combining things that we never thought possible? Yes, the focus right now is very much on Prismatic, and for good reason, but these class items are insane. One of the developers also explained that on their Hunter, they got an ability which allowed power melee kills to cause enemies to ignite, that being Caliban's hand. But they also got an extra dodge charge, that being 6 Coyote. So it's not just taking exotics from other classes, it's taking exotics from within your own class and combining them. We saw a Hunter later on with the perk Death Throws, which is from Verity's Brow, and another Hunter that when using his abilities, he got the buff on his UI called Empowered Abilities, similar to Heart of Inmost Light. Now I'm sure there's probably more we miss, but the point is, these look incredibly potent. Now Bungie has mentioned that this is completely RNG related. These will be drops, and they also sound incredibly rare. But this also led to the question, will this exotic class item essentially kill every exotic in the game? Why would I rock Ophidian Aspects when I can get Ophidian Aspects and another exotic together? And that's a fair point, but it does appear there is going to be some level of restrictions here. For instance, if you notice on the class item for Titan, the Spirit of Star Eater, you're getting the ability to overcharge your super from Orbs of Power, but you're not getting the ability to gain additional super energy from Orbs of Power that you picked up, as well as getting a burst of healing when casting your super or an overshield at maximum overcharge. And the same about Ophidian Aspects. You have the increased handling, but not the increase in reload speed or the increase in AE. Now, could this be the fact that this is a developer build and maybe that's not included on this? Maybe. But this also falls into the nomenclature, the spirit of that exotic, instead of the outright exotic itself. You see, it didn't say Ophidian Aspects and Star Eater Scales. It just said Spirit of Ophidian and Spirit of Star Eater. Almost like it's just taking the main standout benefits of those exotics and combining them together. And there are certain exotics that have secondary benefits that are just as beneficial as their first. The question really comes down to is how is Bungie going to go about choosing exactly which exotic trait is going to make its way into the spirit of that exotic. Now I want us to take a closer look at the abilities we'll have access to for each class. Now it's important to note, you're going to start out with a pre-made subclass kit that has 2 starting options for each type of ability. And Bungie says we'll be able to unlock more from in-mission rewards, post-campaign quests, and we can find some of these as collectibles hidden in the world. Now for our Warlocks, on our supers, you'll have the Cataclysm Nova Bomb, the Winter's Wraith Stasis Super, which both of these you'll be able to start off with. Then there's also going to be Storm Trance, Needle Storm, and Song of Flame, which is going to be our brand new super coming in the final shape. And we've already seen gameplay of this. Essentially it looks a lot like Sunsinger from back in D1. But this will give us like a new powerful grenade that seeks from target to target and allows both your grenade and melee energy to regenerate insanely fast. And casting Song of Flame also appears to make you radiant. You can also amp up your teammates around you, allowing their solar weapons to apply Scorch. Now for our melee options for Prismatic, we're going to start off with Pocket Singularity, Penumbral Blast. You'll also later have access to the Incinerator Snap, Chain Lightning, and Arcane Needle. Then our starting grenades will be Vortex, Cold Snap, along with Healing Grenades, Storm Grenades, and Threadling Grenades. For instance, our aspects that you're going to have available will include Bleak Watcher, which is our Stasis Turret, and Feed the Void. And they've changed things up where Feed the Void will activate on any ability Final Blow. Now you'll eventually have access to Lightning Surge, Weaver's Call, and a new solar aspect called Hellion, which is that little solar buddy that you've seen gameplay previews before of. Now for the rest of our Warlock kits, you'll have access to all the class abilities such as Empowering and Healing Rifts, Phoenix Dive from Solar, and all of our normal glides as well as Blink from Void, which is really cool by the way. That Blink is going to be available to utilize with all these different abilities. Now moving on to our Titans. For our supers, we have Thunder Crash and Blade Fury. Then you can also unlock Hammer of Soul, as well as Glacial Quake and Twilight Arsenal, which is the new Void super for Titans. And we've seen some gameplay of this super already where you jump up in the air, you throw several Void Axes at your enemies, which sucks them in and then explodes. Now this Void Axe then stays on the ground. Your teammates can pick it up and you and them can use it as melee weapons for a limited time. Now for our melee abilities, we have Thunderclap, Frenzy Blade. We'll also have our Shield Throw, Hammer Strike, Shiver Strike. For our grenades, we'll start off with Pulse Grenades and Shackle Grenades. Then we'll also have the Thermite Grenade, the Glacier Grenade, and the Suppressor Grenade. For our aspects, our two starting ones will be Knockout and Diamond Lance, which Diamond Lance can be created from any ability Final Blow, along with Drinker's Lash, Consecration, and a new Void aspect, Unbreakable, which will allow you to hold and consume your grenade to summon a Void Shield, similar like Ursa Furiosa, but as an aspect. And the more damage you take when blocking, the more energy it can charge up and then be released, creating this massive amount of void damage. Now Titans will also of course have access to their normal lifts, but Towering and Rally Barricades will also be present, as well as Thruster from Arc, which again, kind of like Blink, you can utilize it fluidly with everything you see here. Lastly, for Hunters, in terms of supers, the two you're going to be starting off with are Marksman Golden Gun, as well as Silence and Squall, our Stasis super. You can also be able to unlock Shadow Shot Deadfall, our Void Tether, Silk Strike, our Strand super, and the new Arc super for Hunters called Storm's Edge. Now this super looks deadly. Probably going to be way more deadly inside of PvP, but we'll see. The super sees you charge up, you throw a knife at a group of enemies, and then you instantly teleport to that group of enemies and do a spinning slash attack, similar to an ability that we had back in D1, but it has way more AoE. And you can do this up to 3 times before your super runs out. Now for your melee abilities, Hunters, you'll have Knife Trick and Withering Blade, along with Combination Blow, Threaded Spike, and a Snare Bomb. For grenades, you're going to be starting off with Swarm Grenades and Dustfill Grenades. You'll then be able to get Arc Bolt Grenades, Magnetic Grenades, and Grapple Grenades. And for my Hunter aspects, you'll be starting off with Winter Shroud and Stylish Executioner, which will now trigger by defeating any enemy afflicted by any subclass debuff. You can then swap these out once unlocked for Gunpowder Gamble, Threaded Spectre, and the new Arc aspect, Ascension, which sees you take your Arc Staff and essentially lift yourself up into the air and create this Arc Burst that will amplify you and nearby allies. For your class abilities, you're going to have your normal Gambler and Marksman Dodge, along with Acrobat's Dodge from Solar, and your normal jumps, including Blink from Arc Hunter. Now we need to talk about the fragments. And I know you're probably wondering, Cross, why are we going through all this stuff again? I think it's important to go through these things because we're literally about to be build crafting. Now we are getting 21 Prismatic Fragments, which is a noticeable bump up from the 14 to 16 that we normally get. On top of that, these prismatic aspects will allow for 3 fragments to be slotted, and only the more potent options will be staying at 2. Now some of these fragments are very familiar. We've got the Facet of Dawning, which is a starting one, where power melee hits against targets make you radiant, and power melee final blows make both you and nearby allies radiant. Facet of Hope, where while you have an elemental buff, your class ability regenerates more quickly. Facet of Protection, where while surrounded by enemies, you are more resistant to incoming damage. Facet of Purpose, where picking up an Orb of Power grants either Amplified, Restoration, Frost Armor, Woven Mail, or Overshield based on the damage type of your equipped super. Facet of Ruin, this increases the size and damage of the burst when you shatter a stasis crystal or frozen targets, and increases the size of solar ignitions. You see the double dipping there, guys? Facet of Balance, where rapidly defeating targets with light damage grants melee energy, and rapidly defeating targets with dark damage grants grenade energy. Facet of Bravery, where defeating targets with grenades grants volatile rounds to your void weapons, and defeating targets with power melee final blows grants unraveling rounds to your strand weapons. Now why is that particular fragment so deadly? Well guys, you can rock both a void weapon and a strand weapon together, literally giving you volatile and unraveling rounds all in one. Facet of Defiance. Finishers create a detonation that either jolts, scorches, slows, severs, or makes targets volatile based on the damage type of your equipped super. Facet of Dominance. Your void grenades weaken and your arc grenades jolt. Facet of Generosity. Where defeating targets while transcendent creates orbs of power for your allies. Facet of Grace. Where damaging targets with kinetic weapons grants you bonus transcendence energy. Again, like we mentioned above, kinetic weapon damage actually fills both of those meters at once, but at a slower rate. Facet of Grace will potentially counter that. Now, defeating targets with your super will grant you and nearby allies bonus transcendence energy. And then finally, we have Facet of Justice, where while transcendent, your ability final blows explode. Now, if you were counting, this is only 12 fragments, which means there are 9 more Bungie hasn't told us about. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of those fragments are not unlocked until after we beat the raid. Now that I've gone over everything we're getting with Prismatic, or at least everything that's been disclosed to us so far, now we need to go over what is actually not going to be present with Prismatic. And I think as you start to see some of these abilities, depending on how Bungie is going to roll this all out over the next year, this could be their way of balancing things. But here is everything that is not present with Prismatic with the launch of the final shape. For our supers, Daybreak, Well of Radiance, Vortex Nova Bomb, Nova Warp, Chaos Reach, Deadshot, Golden Gun, Blade Barrage, Shadow Shot, Mobius Quiver, Spectral Blades, Gathering Storm, Arc Staff, Burning Maul, Ward of Dawn, Sentinel Shield, and Fist of Havoc. These supers will not be present on Prismatic, at least initially. And then for our aspects, things like Heat Rises, Icarus Dash, Touch of Flame, Child of the Old Gods, Chaos Accelerant, Electrostatic Mine, Arc Soul, Frost Pulse, Ice Flare Bolts, Glacial Harvest, Mind Spun Invocation, The Wanderer, Weave Walk, Knock 'em Down, On Your Mark, Vanishing Step, Trapper's Ambush, Flow State, Lethal Current, Tempest Strike, Shadow Dive, Grim Harvest, Touch of Winter, Whirling Maelstrom, Widow Silk, Ensnaring Slam, Soul Invictus, Roaring Flames, Controlled Demolition, Bastion, Offensive Bulwark, Touch of Thunder, Juggernaut, Crowdclasm, Tectonic Harvest, Howl of the Storm, Banner of War, Into the Fray, and Fletched Storm. Guys, when you lay it all out like that, hot damn it, we got a lot of stuff that is not going to be present on Prismatic. And it does make me wonder, what is the road forward? Is Bungie going to be adding all of these things to Prismatic at some point? Well, that's kind of strange, because if they do that, then what's the point of rocking those subclasses to begin with? Because the fragments themselves are very specific to those classes. Hence why when you look at the fragments on the Prismatic class, there are entirely new fragments. You could say that about the super, the aspects, the grenades, the melees, but the fragments themselves are very much tied to the class. And I know there is some slight overlap there with some of them. But the point is, based on the current selection we've been given, based on everything that we've gone over today and the infographics that you've seen here on the screen, when we go over everything that's not going to be present in Prismatic, this may actually be the balancing act that will be taking place with this new subclass. And initially, after we read the blog post last week, I made the comparison between Prismatic and Warfare. You see, guys, Warfare is a vocation inside of Dragon's Dogma 2 that allows you flexibility. If you want to rock a bow with a sword or a two-handed weapon, you can do so. But in doing so, you lose out on specializations. You lose out on committing to a single vocation. Think of it as almost like a jack of all trades kind of class. And I'm not saying Prismatic is going to be like that, because I do believe it's going to be very potent. I think that Transcendence is going to easily carry this class. And I also think that Bungie locking the exotic class items that merge two exotics into one is going to push a ton of people to play this class. At the same time, guys, I can't say that this is going to completely ruin current builds that specialize. For instance, if I was going to rock a Liar's Handshake build, I could do Liar's Handshake with Combination Blow on Prismatic. But unless I have things like Spark of Recharge, Spark of Feedback, Lethal Current, unless those things are present, I'm going to be hard-pressed using my Liar's Handshake build over a Prismatic variant. Now, at the same time, if Bungie gives me some crazy class item that gives me both Liar's Handshake's ability and Syntheseps, well, hot damn, now I'm ruined. Prismatic, here we come, baby. And really, we just don't know what all is going to be available for us. But let me give you another example. Tommy's Matchbook. Tommy's Matchbook is all about synergizing with Solar 3.0. Is there some great synergy you can get with Prismatic? I'm sure there is, but are you going to have Ember of Ashes? That gives us more Scorch stacks. Ember of Char for more solar ignitions to spread Scorch to affected targets. Ember of Eruption for those ignitions that have increased area of effect. Do you see where I'm going with this, guys? There are certain weapons where their identity is literally tied to a specified subclass, which is why I think our current builds are still going to have value even in the final shape. At the same time, ask yourself, when has Bungie ever given us new subclasses that weren't borderline broken? I think Strand was the best example of Bungie maintaining some level of balance, at least across PvP. Silk Strike was pretty nutty day one. You've seen what Strand has been doing since, and it's been extremely powerful for the entirety of Lightfall. But look no further than Stasis. Literally broke everything. Look at even Forsaken. Dude, Chaos Reach, Ursa Furiosa Titans, Blade Barrage Hunters with Shards of Galanor, all of that stuff was busted day one. Now, does any of this sound broken? I don't know, guys. It's one of those things we're just gonna have to see in practice. Again, Prismatic will likely dominate our sandbox for the year of the final shape. And when you look back on previous subclasses that have come out, that's normally the case. But I do believe other builds will still be able to flourish. As we just mentioned, the benefits of being able to specialize into certain weapons and certain keywords, that is what's going to be reserved for our standard subclasses. Which is why I think Bungie is being very deliberate about what is and what is not being featured within Prismatic. But again, time will tell. In the meantime, we are going to be making a video very soon, and it's going to be theory build crafting with Prismatic. And yes, the speculation is going to be running wild, but I can't help myself, guys. The stuff has got me too hyped, but I would love to hear your thoughts on this, guys. Do you believe Prismatic and these exotic class items will kill our current builds in the game? Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
Slap that like button like your mama told you right.